Chapter 1. The Weight of Silence. Have you ever felt like you are just watching your life pass you by? You have big dreams, but you do nothing. You have goals, but you find excuses. Today, on Level Up Graded Readers, we start the story of a man who almost lost his soul to the silence of tomorrow. Elias sat in his small, dark room. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Every second felt like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. In the corner of the room, under a layer of gray dust, sat a pair of running shoes. They were once bright blue, the color of a clear sky. Now, they were dull and forgotten. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from hard work, but from the fear of trying. For a year, Elias told himself the same lie. I will start tomorrow. I am too tired today. The weather is too cold. My body is not ready. He was a master of excuses, but deep inside, he knew the truth. He was not tired. He was afraid. He was afraid that he was no longer the champion he used to be. He was afraid that his best days were behind him. The silence in the room was suffocating. It was the silence of a life that had stopped moving. He looked at a gold trophy on his shelf. It was from 5 years ago. He was a king then. He was fast. He was strong. He was relentless. Now, he felt like a ghost. He felt like a stranger in his own body. He had gained weight. His energy was gone. His fire had turned into cold ashes. He picked up the shoes. The dust stayed on his fingers. It felt like the dust of his own dreams. He thought about the people who used to cheer for him. Now, nobody called. Nobody remembered. When you stop moving, the world moves on without you. This is the reality check that many of us face. We think we have all the time in the world. We think our dreams will wait for us forever. But time is a thief. It steals your youth, your energy, and your spirit while you are busy making excuses. Elias walked to the window. Outside, the world was busy. People were walking. Cars were moving. And life was happening. He was the only one standing still. He felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was the pain of regret. Regret is much heavier than discipline. Discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. He could feel those tons of regret pulling him down into the floor. Is this it? He whispered to the empty room. Is this how my story ends? A man who had potential but chose comfort. He hated the man in the reflection of the window. He hated the weakness. He hated the laziness. But most of all, he hated the silence. He needed to break the silence before the silence broke him. He sat on the edge of his bed and forced his feet into the old blue shoes. They felt tight. They felt uncomfortable. His mind started screaming at him immediately. Stop. It's too late. You are too old. You are too slow. Just go back to sleep. Just watch TV. Tomorrow is a better day. But the tomorrow trap is how dreams go to die. Elias looked at the clock. It was 4:59 a.m. In 1 minute, the sun would try to rise. In 1 minute, a new day would begin. He stood up. His knees cracked. His back hurt. He felt old, but for the first time in a year, he didn't listen to the excuses. He tied the laces. He tied them tight. He tied them like he was tying his soul back together. The hardest distance to travel is the one between I want and I do. Elias was standing at the starting line of that distance. He walked to the door. His hand hovered over the handle. If he opened this door, the comfort was over. If he opened this door, the struggle would begin. But if he stayed inside, he would die slowly in the silence. He gripped the handle. His knuckles turned white. He thought about the years he had wasted. He thought about the man he wanted to be. He took a deep breath. It was a shaky breath, full of fear, but also full of a tiny, flickering spark. Will he have the strength to open that door and step into the cold dawn? Or will fear pull him back to the warmth of his bed? Chapter 2. The Ghost of Failure. The door groaned as it opened, and the cold morning air hit Elias like a physical blow. But it wasn't the cold that made him hesitate. It was the weight of the past. We all have a ghost that follows us. For some, it is the ghost of a lost opportunity. For others, it is the ghost of a mistake they cannot forget. As Elias took his first step onto the pavement, his mind took a step back in time. 5 years ago. Elias was not a man hiding in a dark room. He was a force of nature. He remembered the sun shining on a different track, thousands of miles away. He remembered the feeling of being invincible. He had a focus so sharp it could cut through stone. But then, the fall happened. It wasn't just a physical trip on the track. It was a collapse of his identity. He remembered the sound of his ligaments snapping, a sound louder than the cheering crowd. He remembered the sudden, terrifying silence that followed. Why do we lose faith in ourselves? Is it because of the pain? Or is it because of what we tell ourselves about the pain after the injury? The doctors told Elias he might never run at a professional level again. His friends told him to be realistic. His rivals simply stopped calling. But the most dangerous voice was his own. He began to repeat a new affirmation. A negative one. I am broken. I am a failure. I am finished. Every time he tried to go for a walk, the memory of that pain would return. He didn't just feel it in his knee. He felt it in his soul. He began to associate effort with agony. He began to believe that his best days were a beautiful dream, and his current life was the harsh reality. He grew comfortable in his sadness because comfort felt safer than the risk of failing again. He allowed the ghost of failure to sit at his table, sleep in his bed, and speak through his mouth. You are protecting yourself. The voice would whisper, if you don't try, you can't lose. But Elias realized, standing there in the dim light of 5:00 a.m., that he had already lost. He had lost his joy. He had lost his discipline. He had lost the man who looked in the mirror with pride. The root of his struggle wasn't the injury from 5 years ago. The root was the story he had been telling himself ever since. He looked down at the street. It looked endless and unforgiving. His heart began to beat faster. Not with excitement, but with a familiar, suffocating fear. His past was a heavy chain wrapped around his ankles. Every step forward felt like he was pulling a mountain behind him. He wondered if he was just chasing a shadow. He wondered if the man he used to be was gone forever. Your past is a lesson, not a life sentence. Elias repeated this to himself. But he didn't believe it yet. He felt like an imposter in his own running gear. He felt like the world was watching and laughing at the broken champion trying to pretend he was still a runner. The ghost was whispering again, louder now, telling him to go back inside where it was warm and safe. Can a man run forward if he is still looking back at his greatest shame? Or will the weight of the past pull him down before he even finishes the first mile? Chapter 3. The Sharp Edge of Truth. The cold pavement felt harder than usual under Elias's feet. He was barely moving, his breath coming in short. Shallow gasps. He passed a local park where a group of younger runners were stretching. Among them was Marcus, a man who had once been Elias's assistant, a man who had stayed silent when Elias fell and then stepped over him to take his place in the spotlight. Marcus looked up, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face, still trying. "Elias," he called out, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "The track doesn't miss you. You're a ghost, chasing a past that died 5 years ago. Just go home. Some people are born to win, and some are born to watch. You've done enough watching." The words stung more than the winter wind. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. He just kept walking, his head down, feeling the hot burn of shame rising in his chest. He went to a small grocery store to buy water. But when he reached for his wallet, he realized he didn't even have enough for a simple bottle. The cashier, a young woman who used to have his poster on her wall, looked at him with pity. That pity was worse than Marcus's insults. It was the look you give to something that is broken beyond repair. He walked to a nearby pond and looked at his reflection in the water. The face staring back was tired. The eyes were dull. He saw a man who had accepted defeat before the battle even started. He realized that his life was full of fractures, small holes of laziness, and fear that had grown into a giant canyon. He had lost his job, his money, and now, his dignity. He was at the absolute bottom. "Enough," he whispered. The word felt like a spark in a dark room. Enough. He was tired of being the man who made excuses. He was tired of being the man who people pitied. He was tired of being a spectator in his own life. The breaking point is not just about pain. It is about the moment you realize that staying the same is more terrifying than the struggle of changing. Elias felt a silent rage building inside him, not at Marcus, not at the world, but at the weak man he had become. He realized that if he didn't change today, he would never change. He would die in this small town. A could-have-been hero who gave up. He gripped the railing of the bridge until his knuckles turned white. The truth was sharp, and it cut deep. But it was the only thing that could wake him up. He wasn't just a runner with a bad knee. He was a man with a broken spirit. And the only person who could fix it was the man in the mirror. When the world tells you that you are finished, do you believe them? Or do you use their doubt as the fuel for your fire? Chapter 4. The Midnight Vow. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, cold shadows across Elias's bedroom. He lay in bed. But sleep was a stranger to him. in the silence of the night. The loudest sound was his own mind. This is the time when the coward and the hero inside every person begin their battle. For years, the coward had been winning, whispering that it was safer to do nothing. But tonight, the hero was finally waking up. He stared at the ceiling, his heart beating with a strange, nervous energy. A big question kept repeating in his head. If not now, when? If not, you. Who? He realized that no one was coming to save him. No coach was going to knock on his door. No miracle was going to fix his life. If he wanted to change, he had to be his own miracle. He had to stop waiting for the perfect time, because the perfect time is a lie told by people who are afraid to start. Elias sat up and looked at his reflection in the dark window. He didn't see the broken runner anymore. He saw a man who was tired of his own excuses. He began to speak to himself, not with doubt, but with power. I will not live like this anymore. I will not let my fear lead me. I will not be a ghost of my past. These were not just words. They were a midnight vow. A promise made in the darkness that would be kept in the light. He stood up and walked to his kitchen. He grabbed the bags of junk food, the old habit-forming distractions, and the things that kept him lazy. He threw them all into the trash. Every item he dropped felt like a weight leaving his spirit. He was cutting the ropes that tied him to his old identity. He felt a cold shiver of fear, but also a burning spark of hope. The fear told him he might fail. The hope told him that even if he failed, he would fail while moving forward. Tomorrow is not a day of the week, he whispered. Tomorrow is a trap. My life starts now. He went back to his bed, not to sleep, but to wait for the sun. He sat with his back straight, his eyes focused on the horizon. He was no longer a victim of his history. He was the creator of his future. He knew the path ahead would be painful. He knew his body would scream. But he also knew that the pain of discipline is nothing compared to the pain of regret. He picked up his old running watch. It was out of battery, just like he had been. He plugged it in and watched the screen flicker to life. It was a sign. The machine was ready. The man was ready. The silence of the room was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. It was the silence before a storm of change that was about to break over his life. He threw away his old habits and made a silent vow. The first step starts at dawn. But will he have the courage to face the world when the sun finally rises? Chapter 5. Leaving the shore. The alarm clock did not need to ring. Elias was already awake. Sitting on the edge of his bed in the gray light of 4:00 a.m. The world was silent, cold, and indifferent for a moment. The warmth of his blanket felt like a trap. It was the shore of his comfort zone. And everything outside that door was a vast, dangerous ocean. But he knew that to find the man he used to be, he had to be willing to lose sight of that shore. He stepped outside, and the wind cut through his thin shirt like a knife. His lungs burned with the first breath of freezing air. His body, heavy from a year of laziness, screamed in protest before he even took a step. Go back, his muscles whispered. You are not ready. His mind shouted. But Elias didn't listen. He closed the door behind him and locked it. He was cutting the cord to his old life. The first mile was agony. Every time his feet hit the pavement, a shock of pain traveled up his legs. He was slow, so slow that he felt embarrassed. He imagined people looking out their windows and laughing at the broken man trying to run. But there was no one there. There was only the sound of his heavy breathing and the rhythm of his shoes. He focused on one streetlight at a time. Just get to the next light. He told himself, just one more minute. This is the hardest part of any change. The beginning is not a victory lap. It is a funeral for your old self. Elias felt the death of his excuses with every painful stride. He was leaving behind the man who slept until noon. He was leaving behind the man who felt sorry for himself. He was moving toward a version of himself that didn't exist yet. And the transition was brutal. By the second mile, his lungs felt like they were on fire. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wanted to stop. He wanted to sit on the curb and cry, but he remembered his vow from the night before. If I stop now, I stay the same forever. He gasped. He pushed his legs harder. He chose the pain of growth over the pain of being stuck. The sun began to peek over the horizon, turning the sky a deep, bruised purple. Elias was drenched in sweat despite the cold. He looked like a man who had been in a fight. And, in a way, he had. He had fought his laziness and won the first round. He wasn't fast. And he wasn't strong yet. But he was moving. He had left the shore. He was in the deep water now. And there was no turning back. His lungs burn after only 1 mile. And his body is begging him to quit. How can he finish a marathon when his own heart feels like it is about to break? Chapter 6. The Art of Focus. Have you ever started something with fire in your heart, only to feel that fire die out after a week? Do you struggle to keep going when the results don't show up immediately? Today, we see how Elias survives the most dangerous part of the journey, the boring, painful reality of daily repetition. The sun rose every single morning, and every single morning, Elias was there to meet it. The initial excitement of starting had faded, replaced by the heavy, gray reality of repetition. This is where most people quit. They want the trophy, but they hate the training. They want the result, but they despise the process. Elias, however, was learning a secret greatness is not born in a single moment of glory. It is built in 1,000 moments of boring, painful discipline. Weeks passed. His life became a clockwork of effort. Wake up at 4:00 a.m. Drink water. Tie the blue shoes. Run. Work. Sleep. Repeat. There were days when it rained so hard the path turned into a river. There were days when the heat felt like a physical weight on his shoulders. There were days when his legs felt like lead. And his mind screamed, just one day off. You deserve a break. But Elias knew that one day off is how the ghost of laziness returns to the house. He stopped looking for motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings change like the weather. Instead, he looked for discipline. Discipline is a choice that stays the same even when you feel like giving up. He began to fall in love with the sweat dripping on the pavement. He found peace in the rhythm of his breathing. He wasn't running away from his past anymore. He was running toward his potential. Every mile was a checkmark on the calendar of his new life. He started to see small changes. His clothes fit differently. His breath didn't catch in his throat as quickly. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The dullness was gone, replaced by a sharp, cold focus. He stopped listening to the music in his headphones and started listening to the sound of his own heart. It was a drumbeat of war, a war against his own limits. He learned that focus is not about saying yes to the goal. It is about saying no to the 1,000 distractions that try to pull you away from it. He practiced the art of focus by silencing the world. He stopped checking social media to see what his rivals were doing. He stopped caring about Marcus's insults. He realized that the only person he needed to beat was the man he was yesterday. If he was 1 second faster, 1 inch stronger, or 1 minute more disciplined, he was winning. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. One morning, as he finished a 12-mile run, he didn't feel exhausted. He felt electric. He felt like a machine that had been repaired and restarted. His body was finally catching up to his will. He looked at the calendar. The big qualifying race was only a month away. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel afraid of the starting line. He felt ready to reclaim his throne. The physical body is growing stronger every day, but a hidden shadow is waiting for him in the darkness. Will his new discipline be enough to survive the storm that is coming? Chapter 7. The Body's Rebellion. Have you ever worked so hard that your body finally said no? What do you do when the pain is so sharp that your mind starts to beg you to quit and go back to your old, easy life? Today, Elias faces the wall, the ultimate test of a warrior's spirit. The morning was colder than usual, and the air felt thick with the smell of coming snow. Elias was 20 miles into his longest run yet. Everything was going according to his discipline. His heart was steady, and his pace was strong. But then, it happened. As he pushed his foot off the pavement to climb a steep hill, a lightning bolt of pain shot through his left knee, the same knee that had betrayed him 5 years ago. He stumbled, gasping for air, and fell to one knee. The world spun for a moment. This wasn't just a small ache. This was the wall. In distance running, the wall is the point where your body has no more fuel, and your mind begins to cannibalize your will. Elias looked at his leg. It was shaking uncontrollably. The old injury was flaring up, screaming at him that he was not a champion, but a fool. I told you. A familiar voice seemed to echo in the wind. It was the voice of Marcus, the voice of the doctors, and the voice of the coward he thought he had killed. You can't change who you are. You are a broken man. Go home before you hurt yourself even more. The temptation was overwhelming. He could stop right now. He could call a taxi, go home, and crawl into his warm bed. No one would blame him. He had tried, hadn't he? But Elias knew that if he stopped now, the wall would stay there forever. The wall is not there to stop you. It is there to see how much you want it. He sat on the cold ground, clutching his knee. his eyes watering from the stinging pain and the freezing wind. He felt the heavy weight of his past trying to pull him back into the mud. He was at a crossroads between his old identity and the man he was fighting to become. "Focus," he whispered, his teeth chattering. "Focus on the next inch. Not the next mile. The next inch." He forced himself to stand. His leg felt like it was made of glass, ready to shatter at any second. He took one step. The pain was a hot needle. He took another step. He wasn't running anymore. He was limping. But he was moving forward. This is the price of a new life. The body will always rebel against change because change is uncomfortable and dangerous. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, not to make you great. To reach greatness, you must be willing to argue with your own brain. You must be willing to look at the wall and say, "You are made of stone, but my will is made of fire." Elias didn't stop. He kept moving, step by agonizing step. As the snow began to fall around him, he was alone on that hill, far from the cheering crowds and the golden trophies. There was no one to see his struggle, and that made it even more powerful. He was building a mindset that didn't need an audience. He was building a soul that could survive the winter. Will he listen to the pain and the voices of his past? Or will he find a way to break through the wall and reach the other side? Chapter 8. The Taste of Progress. Have you ever felt like your hard work is invisible? Do you wonder if you are actually getting closer to your dream? Or just running in circles? Today, we see that the greatest forest starts with a single seed. And for Elias, that seed is finally starting to grow. The snow from the previous week had melted, leaving the air crisp and clean. Elias stood at the entrance of the local track. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't there as a ghost or a spectator. He was there as a runner. His knee still had a dull ache. But it was no longer a wall. It was a reminder of what he had survived. He looked at the stopwatch in his hand. Today was not about a world record. Today was about a small win. He began to run. The rhythm was different now. His body wasn't fighting him. It was following him. He felt the fluid motion of his hips, the steady strike of his midfoot on the synthetic surface, and the cool air filling his lungs without the burning fire of the early days. He finished his first mile, 5 minutes and 40 seconds. He stopped and stared at the numbers. It wasn't his fastest time ever, but it was the fastest he had run since the injury. A small smile touched his lips. It was a strange sensation, one he hadn't felt in a long time. It was the taste of progress. Small wins lead to big victories. Most people ignore the small wins because they are obsessed with the giant leap. But Elias understood now that life is a game of inches. Each inch of progress was a brick in the wall of his new identity. He wasn't just trying to be a runner anymore. He was a runner. As he walked toward the water fountain, he saw a group of young athletes watching him. Among them was Marcus. Usually, Marcus would have a loud insult ready. But today, he was silent. He saw the way Elias moved. He saw the look in Elias's eyes, a look of calm, dangerous certainty. Marcus didn't say a word as Elias walked past him. The silence of his rival was the greatest trophy Elias had earned so far. Elias sat on the bleachers and took a long drink of cold water. He felt a deep sense of relief. The fear that had lived in his chest for 5 years was starting to dissolve. He realized he had potential. He realized that the broken version of himself was just a story he had stopped telling. He was rewriting his book. 1 mile at a time. He looked at the calendar on his phone. The qualifying race was only 2 weeks away. For the first time, he didn't feel like a victim of fate. He felt like the master of his path. He had earned his confidence through sweat and discipline. He was ready for the next level. He was ready for the storm. He has the strength. And he has the hope. But he doesn't know that the dark night of the soul is waiting for him just around the corner. Will his small wins be enough to keep him from falling when the world falls apart? Chapter 9. The Minute. 89. Have you ever felt like you are at the end of your rope? What do you do when the world falls apart exactly when you thought you were winning? Today, we enter the dark night of the soul, the moment where Elias must decide if he is a champion or just a man who had a few good weeks. The sky was not just dark. It was angry. The day of the final qualifying race had arrived. And with it came a storm that the city would remember for years. The wind screamed through the trees, and the rain fell in heavy, cold sheets that turned the track into a river of mud. Elias stood at the starting line, his heart hammering. He had worked for months for this moment. He had found his discipline. He had found his small wins. But the universe was about to ask him one final, brutal question. The race began. And for the first 10 miles, Elias was a machine. He moved through the mud and the wind with a focus that terrified his rivals. He was in the lead. He could see the finish line in his mind. But at mile 22, disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind caught a metal barrier, blowing it directly into his path. Elias had no time to react. He tripped, his body slamming into the cold, wet earth. He felt a sickening pop in his left knee. The old ghost had returned with a vengeance. He lay face down in the mud, the cold water soaking through his clothes. The physical pain was a white-hot fire. But the mental pain was even worse. He heard the splash of feet as his rivals ran past him. He heard Marcus's voice as he disappeared into the gray mist. "I told you, Elias, you don't belong here." He was alone. The stadium lights were far away, and the silence of the storm felt like a tomb. This was the minute 89, the moment of total collapse. Why? The question echoed in his mind. Why did he try? Why did he wake up at 4:00 a.m.? Why did he believe he could be more than a broken man? He felt the heavy weight of his past pulling him down into the mud, telling him to stay there. It would be so easy to close his eyes and let the paramedics carry away his broken body. He could go back to his dark room. He could go back to his excuses. He was tired. He was hurt. He was finished. Every muscle in his body was begging him to quit. The dark night of the soul is not just a test of strength. It is a test of identity. In the mud and the rain, Elias had to decide who he was. Was he the man who made excuses? Or was he the man who made a midnight vow? He realized that the world didn't owe him a victory just because he worked hard. The world only gives you what you are willing to take through the fire. He was at the edge of the abyss, and his soul was searching for a single reason to keep breathing. His hands are in the mud, and his rivals are gone. He is standing at the edge of the end. Is this where the story of the runner dies? Or is there something deeper than pain waiting to wake up? Chapter 10. The Power of Choice. Have you ever reached the point where you have nothing left to give, and the world expects you to stay down? What happens when the body breaks, but the soul refuses to listen? Today, we witness the moment Elias stops being a victim and becomes a legend. The rain continued to hammer the earth, turning the track into a cold, dark grave for Elias's dreams. He lay in the mud, his face pressed against the wet ground. His left knee was screaming, a sharp, white-hot fire that told him his race was over. He could hear the distant splashing of the other runners. They were moving away from him. They were moving toward the finish line while he was becoming part of the dirt. For a moment, the silence of the storm felt peaceful. If he stayed down, the pain would eventually stop. If he stayed down, he would never have to fail again. But then, a memory flickered in his mind. It wasn't a memory of a trophy or a crowd. It was the memory of the cold, dark room where he had sat for a year, watching the dust grow on his shoes. He remembered the weight of regret. He remembered the suffocating silence of a life without a purpose. He realized that the mud he was lying in was cold, but the room he had left was much colder. He had made a midnight vow. He had promised himself that he would not be a ghost anymore. I am not my pain. He whispered into the mud. His voice was weak, but it was there. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. This is the secret of the second wind. It does not come from your lungs. It does not come from your muscles. The second wind is a choice. It is the moment you decide that your why is bigger than your pain. Elias dug his fingers into the wet earth. He felt the grit under his fingernails. He felt the cold water soaking into his skin. He didn't focus on the finish line. He didn't focus on the miles he still had to run. He focused on one thing, his hands. He pushed. His body shook. His knee protested with a new wave of agony. But he didn't stop. He pushed until his chest was off the ground. He pushed until he was on his knees. He looked up at the gray sky, the rain washing the mud from his eyes. He didn't see the storm as an enemy anymore. He saw it as a witness. The storm was there to see the rebirth of a man who refused to die. He stood up. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. His left leg was weak, but his mind was a steel blade. He realized that his strength did not come from his body. His strength came from the fact that he was still standing when everyone expected him to be finished. He wasn't running for a medal anymore. He was running to prove to the man in the mirror that he was unstoppable. He took a step. It hurt. He took another step. It was faster. He started to move, his breath coming in deep. Powerful waves. Rise, he told himself. Rise, rise, rise. The other runners were far ahead, but they were running on muscle. Elias was running on something else. He was running on the fire of 1,000 no's that he was finally turning into a yes. He felt a strange energy beginning to flow through his limbs. The pain was still there, but it was distant, like a noise in another room. He was no longer a man in a race. He was a force of nature reclaiming its path. He began to pick up speed. His feet hit the mud with a rhythm that sounded like a drum beat. He was the resurrection. He was the phoenix rising from the ashes of his own failure. He is back on his feet, and his heart is beating with the power of 1,000 suns. But his rivals are miles ahead, and the clock is ticking. Can he close the gap? Or has the resurrection come too late? Chapter 11, Chasing the Light. Have you ever seen a man who has lost everything suddenly find a power that defies logic? What happens when the finish line is no longer a place on a map, but a declaration of your soul? Today, we watch Elias chase the light through the darkest storm. The final mile of the race felt like a holy battle. The rain was still falling, but Elias didn't feel the cold anymore. He felt a white-hot energy burning in his chest, a fire that was consuming his exhaustion and his pain. He was no longer running with his legs. He was running with his mindset. Ahead of him, the gray shapes of his rivals began to appear through the mist. They were slowing down. They were tired. They were human. Elias, in this moment, was something more. He was a man who had already died in the mud and had chosen to rise. He passed the first runner, then the second. He didn't look at their faces. He only looked at the space in front of him. His focus was so sharp it felt like a physical weapon. He could see the stadium lights in the distance, a golden glow cutting through the blue-black storm. That light was his destiny. Every step was a drumbeat of victory. Strike, breathe, rise. Strike, breathe, rise. The rhythm was perfect. The rhythm was relentless. Then, he saw Marcus, the man who had mocked him, the man who represented every doubt Elias ever had. I was struggling only 50 yards ahead. Marcus was weaving. His shoulders slumped, his spirit breaking under the weight of the storm. Elias didn't feel anger when he saw him. He felt a strange kind of peace. He realized that Marcus was never the real enemy. The real enemy was the version of Elias that would have stayed in the mud. By beating Marcus, he was finally killing the ghost of his past. Elias accelerated. It was a second wind that felt like a gift from the universe. He flew past Marcus like a shadow. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The sound of Elias's breathing, steady and powerful, was the only answer he needed to give. He entered the stadium, and the roar of the crowd hit him like a tidal wave. They weren't just cheering for a runner. They were cheering for a miracle. They saw a man drenched in mud, bleeding from his knee, but moving with the grace of a god. The finish line was a thin white tape stretched across the track. To anyone else, it was just string. To Elias, it was the end of a 5-year nightmare. He pushed his chest forward. His eyes locked on that line. He didn't hear the noise. He didn't feel the ground. He only felt the light. Snap. The tape broke against his chest. He didn't stop immediately. He ran until his heart felt like it would explode with joy. He had done it. He hadn't just won a race. He had won back his life. He slowed to a walk and looked up at the stadium lights. The rain was still falling, but now it felt like a baptism. He fell to his knees, not in weakness, but in gratitude. He touched the track with his hands. He was a champion again. But this time, the gold wasn't around his neck. It was inside his soul. Victory is sweetest when you have tasted the dirt of defeat. He had faced the minute 89 and he had chosen to fight. He was no longer a broken runner. He was a man who knew that as long as he could breathe, he could win. He has the trophy, and he has the glory. But as the lights dim and the crowd goes home, he realizes that the real prize is something much deeper. What is the new identity of a man who has conquered himself? Chapter 12. The Master of the Path. Have you ever reached a goal and realized that the person who started the journey is gone forever? What happens when you no longer fear the storm? Because you have become the storm. Today, we see the birth of a man who is truly free. The stadium was quiet now. The crowds had gone home, and the bright lights had been turned off, leaving only the soft glow of the moon on the wet track. Elias stood in the center of the field, his gold medal heavy in his hand. But as he looked at the medal, he realized something profound. The medal was just a piece of history. The real victory was the man standing in his shoes. He looked down at his reflection in a small pool of rainwater. He didn't see a broken runner anymore. He didn't see a victim of a bad knee or a man who made excuses. He saw a master of his own path. This is the power of a new identity. When you change your habits, you change your results. But when you change your mindset, you change your life. Elias felt a deep, unshakable peace in his chest. For years, he had been running away from failure. He had been hiding from the world because he was afraid of being less than perfect. Now, he realized that failure was never his enemy. Failure was his teacher. The mud, the rain, and the pain of the minute 89 were the tools that had carved away his weakness. He walked out of the stadium with a new posture. His shoulders were back, his head was high, and his gaze was steady. He didn't need the applause of thousands to feel successful. He only needed the approval of the man in the mirror. He understood now that discipline is not a punishment. It is a form of self-love. It is the act of choosing what you want most over what you want right now. He was no longer afraid of the future. He knew that even if he fell again, he had the power to rise. As he walked through the streets of his town, the world looked different. The cold wind didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a greeting. The steep hills didn't look like obstacles. They looked like opportunities to grow stronger. He was no longer a stranger in his own body. He was the captain of his soul. He had reclaimed his power not by winning a race, but by winning the war against his own laziness and fear. He returned to his small room, the same room where he had sat in silence for a year. He looked at the dust on the shelves. He didn't feel sad anymore. He felt gratitude. That room was where his struggle began, and it was where his new identity was born. He realized that you don't run to win a race. You run to win your life. He was a new man, with a new heart and a new purpose. He was unstoppable, not because he never failed, but because he never stopped. He has mastered himself, and he has conquered his past. But now that he has the light, will he keep it for himself? Or will he find a way to share it with the world? Chapter 13. The Eternal Echo. Have you ever looked back at your greatest pain and realized it was actually your greatest gift? What do you do with the fire you have found once the race is over? Today, we learn that true greatness is not about what you take from the world, but what you leave behind. The sun was setting over the local track, painting the sky in shades of gold and deep orange. Elias sat on the bleachers, watching a new generation of runners circle the track. He wasn't looking at their speed. He was looking at their spirits. He saw the ones who were coasting on talent, and he saw the ones who were struggling, their faces tight with the same doubt he had carried for years. He realized that his journey was never just about a gold medal. It was about creating a map for others to follow when they are lost in the dark. A young boy, no older than 16, stopped near the fence. He was breathing hard. His shoulders slumped, and his eyes were filled with the shadow of defeat. He looked at his old, worn-out shoes, and then at the track. Ready to walk away, Elias stood up and walked toward him. He didn't offer a speech about winning. He simply reached down and helped the boy tie his laces. The first mile is always a lie, Elias said softly. It tells you that you are weak. But the last mile tells you the truth. You are a warrior. This is the eternal echo of a life well lived. Your struggle is the map for someone else's survival. Elias understood now that every tear he shed in that dark room and every drop of sweat he left in the mud of minute 89 was a payment for the wisdom he now possessed. Wisdom is not something you read in a book. It is something you bleed for. He looked at the boy and saw himself 5 years ago. He realized that by helping this stranger, he was honoring his own pain. True success is the ability to look at your past and feel nothing but gratitude. Elias was grateful for the injury. He was grateful for the silence of his friends. He was even grateful for Marcus's insults. Without the darkness, he never would have been forced to find the light inside himself. He had learned that the world does not break you to destroy you. It breaks you to see what you are made of. He was made of fire. He was made of iron. He was made of a will that could not be silenced. Your journey is not a straight line. Elias told the young runner, it is a mountain path. There will be storms. There will be walls. But remember this, the mountain is not there to stop you. It is there to show you how high you can climb. The boy looked up, a small spark of hope returning to his eyes. He didn't need a miracle. He just needed to know that someone else had survived the fire. Elias walked away as the first stars began to appear. He felt a deep sense of completion. He had transformed his tragedy into a legacy. He had turned his failure into a philosophy. He knew that his feet would one day stop running. But the lessons he had learned would echo forever in the hearts of those he inspired. Your legacy is not the trophies on your shelf. It is the fire you ignite in others. The story ends here. But your journey is just beginning. Now that the fire has been passed to you, will you let it fade? Or will you use it to burn down your excuses? Chapter 14. The torch is yours. You have just witnessed the journey of Elias. You saw him sitting in the dust of his own excuses. You saw him break through the wall and rise from the mud of his dark night. But this video on Level Upgraded Readers was never just about a runner named Elias. This story was a mirror. It was designed to show you the giant that is currently sleeping inside of you. Let's recap the language of success we have learned today. Remember the word discipline. It is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Elias didn't find success because he was lucky. He found it because he chose to wake up at 4:00 a.m. when his body begged for sleep. Think about the word mindset. It is the lens through which you see the world. When Elias changed his mindset, the rain stopped being an obstacle and started being a witness to his strength. And never forget the power of resilience. It is the ability to hit the mud at minute 89 and still find the will to stand up. Now, look at your own life. What is your dark room? What are the shoes in your corner that are gathering dust? Maybe you want to start a business, learn a new language, or fix a broken relationship. Whatever your dream is, the ghost of failure is likely whispering the same lies to you that it whispered to Elias. It tells you that you are too old, too slow, or that it's too late. But the story of the second wind proves that those voices are liars. The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the set of excuses you keep repeating to yourself. The second wind is not a miracle that happens to special people. It is a choice available to anyone who refuses to stay down. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. You just need to have the courage to start. The pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts forever. Which one will you choose today? We want you to make a commitment right now. Do not just close this video and go back to your old habits. That is how dreams die. Instead, we want you to claim your future. Go to the comments section below and write one thing you are going to change starting today. Write, "I will not quit," or "My journey starts now." By writing it down, you are making a vow to yourself and to this community. The torch has been passed to you. Elias found his light in the storm. And now it is your turn to burn down your limitations. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting for the wind to change. Start running, and the wind will find you. You have the power. You have the potential. And most importantly, you have the choice. Thank you for being part of Level Upgraded Readers. If this story moved you, share it with someone who is currently sitting in their own dark room. Subscribe to keep feeding your mind with the language of growth. Now, stand up, tie your laces, and go write the next chapter of your life. The world is waiting for your second wind.